Go ahead and call this Pompano Beach City Commission Budget Workshop to order. Kervin, let's go ahead and call the roll.
Commissioner Eaton, Commissioner Fournier,
Here.
Commissioner Moss,
Here.
Commissioner Perkins,
Here.
Vice Mayor McGee,
Here.
Mayor Harden.
Here. Thank you. We can all stand for the invocation and the Pledge of Allegiance. Father, please give us the wisdom to consider this budget for our city, allow us to do the best for our residents, come to consensus on the future revenues and spending for our city, and make our city great. Amen. All right. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Very good. Right. Any changes to our agenda, Ms. Sybil?
No, Mayor.
Very good. Can I get a motion approving the agenda as printed?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimous. That takes us up to presentation. City Manager's presentation, budget overview and summary FY 2023-2024. After the presentation, the City Commission will recess for half hour and then reconvene in the City Manager's large conference room on the 4th floor of City Hall. At this time, I'll turn it over to you, Ms. Sybil.
Thank you, Mayor. Good morning again, Commissioners. As you may recall, back in June, we held our first budget workshop, at which point we presented the recommended fiscal year 2024 general fund budget. This morning, Ms. Diamante will be presented a recommended fiscal year 2024 citywide budget for your consideration. The objective by the end of the workshop today is hopefully gain consensus among the Commission in terms of the recommended millage rates and fire assessment fee, which will allow us to move forward on our timeline to ensure we are in compliance with regulatory deadlines to ultimately adopt a balanced budget by October 1st of 2023. And with that, I'll go ahead and turn things over to Ms. Diamante. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Ms. Diamante.
Good morning. Good morning, Mayor, Vice Mayor, City Commissioners, and staff, public. Thank you for coming this morning. This is a July budget workshop. As Ms. Sybil mentioned, the purpose is to gain Commission consensus on the recommended millage rates, budgets, and fire assessment fees, as well as the 5-year capital improvement plan for fiscal year 2024-2028. And I just want to thank staff, of course, for all their hard work during this budget season. It has been quite challenging this year to, as every other year that presents its own challenges. So I'm really grateful that I'm working with them as well as with the City Manager's office. So thank you to all who contributed in this budget process. So we're going to start with the budget workshop presentation outline. And we do have the fiscal year, an overview of the fiscal year 24 recommended citywide revenues. We're going to explain the variances there, and then we will going to move forward with the expense side. And then we're going to explain variances for major funds, internal service funds, special revenues, and enterprise funds, general capital fund, and geo bond funds. Later on, we're going to focus mostly on the general fund when we're going to explain the revenues and expenditures for the general fund, providing the fire assessment fee recommendations, fiscal year 24 aggregate millage rate, and the final steps in the budget process. Citywide, for fiscal year 2024, it estimated that the revenues total $424.9 million, rounded. This represents a $64 million or 17.8% increase when it's compared to fiscal year 23 adopted revenues of $360.8 million. That is the adopted budget for fiscal year 23. We're going to explain the major variances here. Charges and services increased by $6 million, mostly due to the combination of the recommended increase in the EMS transport fees, water, wastewater, and stormwater fees scheduled, 1.08 million, solid waste service charges, 1.9 million, and this is associated with the new contract. There are no major changes for fines and forfeitures. Intergovernmental revenues increased by $3.4 million. That is mostly due to the increase in state revenue sharing, pari-mutuel, half-cents sales tax. It should be noted that some of these revenues are recovering from COVID-19 pandemic, and so we are trying to mimic and take a look at the trends of their actuals and how they're behaving for next year. The school board reimbursement for the SRO program, or School Resource Officers Program, increased by $774,000, and that is due to the negotiations between the school board and various municipalities in Broward County. Licenses, permits, and assessments increased by $6.8 million. This increase is due to the increase in the fire assessment fee, which is anticipated to cover 88% of the eligible fire operations, electric franchise tax, and building permit revenues. Miscellaneous revenues increased by $1.1 million. It's mostly due to the updated utility recovery fee, disposal fees, and lease revenues. Other financing sources increased by $15.4 million, and this is the net increase. We do see some increases and decreases there, mostly due to the fund balance for various funds allocated usually for capital improvement projects for all funds budgeted. Other sources increased by $6 million, mostly due to the updated internal service fees. Transfers, the net increase is $13 million. We do see an increase from the general fund to the EMS fund and the capital improvement fund. We do have a decrease in ARPA funds, that was one-time allocation of those funds for public safety expenditures. Decrease in utility and stormwater transfer to the capital funds due to the scheduling of the capital improvement projects. Then we do have an increase in park impact fee fund to the general capital fund for capital projects. And a decrease in parking capital fund transfer due to the one-time nature of the expense. Property taxes increased by $11.4 million, and that is mostly due to the increase in property valuation, and this includes general fund, EMS fund, and the debt service funds. Non-ad valorem taxes increased by $898,000, mostly due to the stabilization of these revenues from COVID-19 pandemic. We're taking a look at the general fund expense budget. Again, the total budget estimated for fiscal year 2024 is $424.9 million. The major drivers for this increase on the expense side include $5.3 million in salaries and benefits adjustments, $11 million in pension contributions, $5.6 million in internal service fees, and $1.9 million in insurance premiums, $7.8 million in repair, maintenance, utility services, and operating supplies, $718,000 increase in debt service for pay-as-you-go capital replacement plan, $14.6 million transfer for capital improvement projects, $1.3 million increase in tax increment financing. It is the allocation to the CRAs. And then various miscellaneous expenditures. This chart illustrates the recommended fiscal year 24 budget for major fund categories compared with the 23 adopted budget. We're going to move forward with the explanation of variances for major fund categories, and we're going to start with the internal service funds, which accounts for services provided to other departments or agencies on a cost of reimbursement basis. Central stores and central services funds are comparable to fiscal year 23 adopted budget. We do have a 13% or $468,000 increase in information technologies fund. This is primarily due to the annual adjustments of salaries and benefits, which include the full-time cybersecurity officer, citywide computer replacement, and annual software subscriptions. 6% or $880,000 increase in health insurance funds is due to the annual adjustments of insurance premiums. 27% or 1.6 million increase in risk management is primarily due to the adjustments of insurance premiums and contingency account. $560,000 in vehicle services is mainly due to the adjustments in auto parts. Special revenue funds are established whereby the revenues are restricted for a special purpose. Office of Housing and Urban Improvement, or OHUI as it's referenced, recommended budget is comparable to 23 adopted budget. This is grant funding. 95% or $13.5 million in increase in building inspections fund is mostly associated with the increase in personnel adjustments, capital, and $5.4 million to the building capital improvement fund, as well as internal service charges. We do have a $50,000 increase for local law enforcement trust fund. This fund is used to cover the cost of the SRO program. $3.1 million increase in EMS fund is mostly associated with the increase in personnel costs as approved by the collective bargaining agreement. $392,000 in project management CIP fund is mostly associated with the salaries and benefit adjustments. And then we have one-time expenditures for cemetery trust funds. Last year we did have a couple of capital improvement projects which we allocated funding for. Enterprise funds are to recover the costs of services provided by the function. We do have $1.7 million increase in the utilities and renewal and replacement fund, which is the capital fund for the utilities. And it's mostly associated with the adjustments in salaries and benefits to include 2 full-time positions, capital replacement plan for fiscal year 24, and disposal charges. We do have a decrease in transfers to the capital replacement plan due to the timing of the CIPs. $3.2 million increase in stormwater and stormwater capital fund is due to the scheduling of the capital projects, and then to include also 2 full-time positions. $117,000 increase in Air Park and Air Park Capital Fund is mostly associated with the scheduled capital improvement projects and annual adjustments of salaries and benefits. We do have $2.2 million decrease in parking and parking capital fund. It is due to the decrease in transfers as a one-time capital project was funded last year. $2.2 million increase in solid waste fund is mostly associated with the increase in hauling charges as per the new contract and some contingency and capital replacement plan associated with the operations of this fund. Geo-bond debt service fund is comparable to last year's budget. Again, we do see a little decrease here due to the increase in the property valuation, but this is based on the schedule of payments for debt and principal of these geo bonds. General capital fund accounts for $17.6 million this year compared to last year, which was only $9 million. Staff is proposing to fund a number of new and existing capital improvement projects. Total parks and recreation and golf projects account for $5.9 million. Fire capital improvement projects, $2.3 million. Public works, streets, bridges, roads, lights, and wayfinding, $7 million. A detailed list of all capital improvement projects has been included in your backup and your recommended budget book. The recommended general fund budget, we're estimating a total of $210 million. General government services account for 15% of that amount. Public works, facilities, engineering, 18% or $36.9 million. Parks, recreation, cultural affairs, tourism, and marketing, 13% or $27.5 million. And the majority of the expenditures goes for public safety services, $113 million or 54%. This chart is a historical chart that shows 2 years worth of actuals, last year's adopted, and the recommended budget for the general fund. We do have a $30.3 million increase when we compare the recommended budget with the approved budget of fiscal year 23. Moving forward, we're going to explain the variances for the general fund recommended expenditures. Personnel services increased by $12 million, and this is due to the pension contribution, $9.2 million, which includes also the police pension contribution that the city is going to make and we did go into this explanation in the June workshop. We're taking over and administer this expense from Broward County Sheriff's Office contribution. So it's just administrative in nature. It doesn't change anything to the city's contribution towards this plan. Operating expenses increased by $4.9 million. This is mostly due to the utilities and maintenance accounts, internal service charges, and the PSO contract that is shifted. The city is aware that there is a recent bill signed regarding the Florida retirement system, which is going to make changes to the pension contribution for police officers. We're currently still working with the Broward County Sheriff's Office to determine the cost of that, of the impact of that particular bill. So we're going to reevaluate that and come back to you with those numbers. We do have a capital decrease of $287,000. This is due to one-time capital replacement plan for the city. Transfers increased by $11.1 million, and this is due to the additional one-time funding allocated for the general capital projects and EMS fund. Other expenses increased by $2.4 million, and is primarily associated with the debt service for capital lease, tax increment financing to the CRAs for the CRA districts. Now we're going to look at each department in the general fund and explain the variances there. We have the general government. The increase is 9% or $1.3 million. And it is primarily due to the annual adjustments for salaries, benefits, and pension contributions to include 3 new full-time positions. Finance department increased by $190,000, primarily due to the annual adjustments for salaries and benefits. Development services, we do have a decrease here. We're proposing to transfer 8 positions related to the business tax receipts function to code compliance. However, we have added $380,000 for sustainability project portfolio as previously approved by the City Commission. Code compliance, again, we do see a variance in code compliance. We transfer the business tax receipt function here. It's 8 positions and associated operating expenditures. This reorganization will streamline the existing services as a result and will bring efficiencies for the city. Police services increased by $3.3 million is due to the annual consideration for police services provided by our Broward County Sheriff's Office, which also includes the SRO program, all 16 SROs. Fire increased by $5.4 million, and that is mainly due to the increase in personnel costs associated with the approved collective bargaining agreement. We do have 1 new full-time position that is going to provide assistance for the Fire Training Academy. Public Works increased by $1.5 million, mostly due to the annual adjustments for salaries, fringe benefits, pension contribution, and other internal service charges. Engineering, $175,000 due to the annual adjustments of salaries and benefits. Facilities maintenance increase is primarily due to the associated adjustments for utility and maintenance accounts, and due to the electric FPL conversion of light fixtures, as well water bill, and also we are proposing a new full-time general trades mechanic. Parks and Recreation increased by $2 million is associated with the annual adjustments of salaries and fringe benefits, as well as pension contributions, 2 full-time park rangers positions, maintenance for parks and other facilities. Non-departmental increased by $14.1 million. This is mostly due to the transfers to the EMS fund and the general capital fund, and also the TIF increment, tax increment financing. Housing and social services, 8%. This is due to the annual adjustments of salaries and benefits. Now we're going to move forward with the non-ad valorem revenues. We are estimating $113.5 million in total ad valorem revenues. And taxes, non-ad valorem taxes account for 16% of the total. Franchise taxes and fire fees, 35%. Intergovernmental revenue, 15%. Charges for services, 6%. Fines and forfeitures, 1%. Miscellaneous and transfers, 4%. And other sources, 23%. Again, this is a chart that illustrates the non-ad valorem revenues for the general fund. We account for $19.8 million increase when it's compared to fiscal year 23 adopted budget. Explaining variances, non-ad valorem taxes increased by about $700,000, mostly due to the adjustments to utility services taxes. Franchise and fire fees, $5.8 million. Associated with the recommended adjustments for the fire assessment fees, $3.8 million. And adjustments in franchise taxes, $2 million. Intergovernmental revenues increased by $3.4 million, associated with the adjustment of state revenue share, local shared revenues, and federal grants. Charges for services increased by $950,000 due to the anticipated revenues generated from the reopening of the Pines course. No significant changes for fines and forfeitures and miscellaneous and transfers. We do have a decrease in ARPA revenues. As mentioned, this was a one-time funding allocated in 23 for public safety expenditures. Other sources increased by $11.5 million, and this is due to the one-time allocation of fund balance for capital improvement projects. As previously mentioned, a number of state and other revenues are being adjusted due to the stabilization following the COVID-19 pandemic. Fiscal year 24 proposed fire assessment fees. As mentioned in June budget workshop, the city hired a consultant to update the fire assessment fee study for the allocation of fees based on the services provided. This study conducted that we have to have a shift in the proposed rates, and $34 of that, it is a shift that will generate the same amount of revenues as last year. However, we have adjusted the residential fee at 81% and all the other fees according to the study, as the study showed, to fund approximately 88% of the eligible fire operation costs for fiscal year 24. We're estimating to receive a gross revenues of $30.2 or $43 million in assessed revenues, or a net of $28.7 million, which is $3.7 million increase from the previous fiscal year. Now, there might be some changes in non-residential rates until the adoption of the fire assessment resolution, which will come in front of you during the July 25th meeting, City Commission meeting. We will have further discussions on that. Mostly the rates will go down due to some other changes that we need to consider. We don't have the data yet, so that will come up to you at a later time. Final note here is that the general fund ad valorem revenues cover approximately 100% of the Ocean Rescue Division, and the EMS budget, the transfer to the EMS budget, which of course is not covered by the fire assessment fee. Those are not eligible costs. Now, we do have a total recommended budget on the expenditure side, and then we calculated and estimated the non-ad valorem revenue sources. We calculate then the ad valorem revenues that will be needed to have a balanced budget for the general fund. The city received the July 1st valuation, which came in at $19.1 billion. And this is a 11.11% increase from the previous fiscal year. This is the final valuation that we use for budgeting purposes. So the new construction came in at $136 million, which represents a 54% decrease when it's compared to July 1st, 22 valuation. So total estimated expenditures for the general fund are $210 million, reduced that by non-ad valorem revenues, $113 million. It provides $96.5 million or $0.6 million in ad valorem revenues we need to levy to balance the general fund. Divided that by net mill provides the millage rate of 5.3232 as the recommended millage rate for fiscal year 24. We do look at an aggregate millage rate decrease overall for the city's portion of the tax bill of 0.10 cents or 10%, this decrease is mostly due to the increase in the valuation. We see a drop in the GO bond debt service of millage rates for next year. Then final steps in the budget process. We are here at the July budget workshop on July 18th. We're anticipating to adopt the fire assessment fees resolution on July 25th during the regular City Commission meeting. July 13th is the first public budget hearing when the City Commission adopts the preliminary millage rates and budgets for the city, as well as the final fire assessment fee resolution. September 20th is the final public budget hearing, which is the adoption of the final millage rates and budgets for the city, as well as the 5-year capital improvement plan. And that concludes my comments, my presentation.
Very good. Thank you for that. And thank you, all the staff for participating in this process. I know it's a year-long process. It never ends. It starts the minute we approve our budget. The next year's budget starts. So thank you to everybody. I know it's a lot of work. Do we have any questions at this point in time, or are we ready to recess this and we'll reconvene upstairs? Any questions at this point? Seeing none, this meeting is in recess, correct, Mr. Berman? There.